I've already tried filming this 4 times. This is my last time. Let me just start with this little introduction. This is a story time of how I quit my first corporate job, cold turkey. Okay, I worked there June, I believe summer 2021 to the last week of December 2021. It was, yeah, I mean, we'll go into the details. I'm just telling this now because it's been a little bit over a year since my last date. And wow, I still have the details in my mind. I thought I would share it for anybody else who's interested in this journey, in this story, because when I was quitting, I was looking up a ton of these YouTube videos and they really served as inspiration for me. They really helped me and gave me that strength because honestly, I didn't know anybody else in my life that had experience doing this. To give a little context, this was my first job out of college. It was my first big girl corporate 9-to-5 job, and I had an intern at this very same company from junior to senior as well. So I just kind of like transitioned over to full-time. The only thing different was like I was working for a different team and had different responsibilities. But otherwise, like I knew what the company was about. I knew like the services and products they were doing. I had also like interned at other corporate environments before. This one's definitely more chill though because it's a tech company, so it's actually I don't think I've ever done like a suit and tie kind of job because that's just not in my lane. That's cool for you if you do that, but yeah, that was never something I wanted to get into in the first place. So tech was just like I thought would be the best fit for me if I was to do a job. To be very, very honest, I kind of knew I was gonna leave at the beginning at some point, whether it be sooner or later, because I just am somebody who doesn't see myself like working 40 years at a company. Also, that's just like not the thing in tech anyways. It's very normalized. I also worked in media before, so people were jumping like 2-3 years around. Even before, like I've always questioned the system a little bit. I always knew I didn't want to do the being born, going to school, going to work for 40 years and the retirement death route. Like I always just knew I didn't really want to do that. So from the beginning, I've like questioned going to college, questioned my internships, and yes, I did question the role when I did get it. But even so, I still want to say I'm very grateful for my recruiter who was super cool in the process, and everyone that I worked with because they are all very respectable in their fields and just very knowledgeable people overall. But still, at the end, it wasn't really for me, but I still went into it with an open mind because I was like, I am a little baby, so I'm just gonna learn and see what's up, embrace the flow, let it be, and just see like, you know, this is just another good experience to have. And so that's kind of what I did. I started a couple months after graduation in the summer, like I mentioned before, and as I was getting into my role and stuff, you know, I think the working environment also played a part into it because it was 2021, so the world was kind of a mess and it was remote working. And I also remote internship, so it wasn't like a huge deal, and I preferred remote working anyways. But I think that played into just me not really feeling I had any like emotional attachment to it. It was just like something that I did, and you could argue that maybe you shouldn't have emotional attachments to your job. But yeah, that just made it a little bit more emotionally taxing even because it was like log in, do your work, and leave, and you don't really talk to anybody. Like we did have team meetings and stuff if you get to like have these I don't know, other social times. It just makes work less worky, you know what I'm talking about? So I definitely felt that, and my role itself, like it just became a little bit more repetitive too, and I don't want this to come off as like complaining video, so I'm just gonna keep it brief. But yeah, it just became more repetitive, and since we were going into winter, the days were getting darker, so it kind of just like had this like little gloom over me. And I have also thought to myself, like, where is this really gonna lead me? Like I mentioned before, I'm like pretty existential, so I was thinking constantly like, you know, how is this really contributing to my life? Where is this gonna lead me? What's the path this is gonna take me on? What does this look like in the next 2 to 3, 4 or 5, whatever, however many years later? And the answer to that was probably going to be like a promotion and climbing the corporate ladder, working at similar roles at, in the similar industry or field, or, as much as the company culture itself can be great, I just also couldn't find myself having a passion for B2B SaaS software. Also, I was struggling to feel as passionate as everyone else about how good the company culture is, because I do think it is really good, like top in the corporate environments in general, but people loved it so much that I also felt like I almost couldn't keep up with it. So there was another bit of misalignment there and just feeling like I didn't really belong. So there was, a lot of different factors, and I also knew that if it was at another company, I probably would maybe feel the same way, because I don't know if I could ever feel like I'm a family. Like I'm in a family with a company. Like there was also a little company change that kind of gave me a sign, but I overall feel like the biggest reason was just looking down the road and not really seeing how this was going to serve me. Like my role itself was very valuable, and I think impactful for the company, did make a decent impact where it affected the company's reputation. So I think it was impactful to that extent. But when I looked at myself, it wasn't really meaningful, and it wasn't really fulfilling. And maybe a fact that we have to accept is that jobs just aren't supposed to be fulfilling. It's just the means to an end. If that is the case, I just did not want that for me, and the time to change, there was no better time to change and at least try something different than that time. So that feeling, combined with just like, maybe I could be using this time to work on something that is more aligned with what I wanted, and this like opportunity cost, made me ultimately decide to quit. Another brief little factor that I also had pop into my head a couple times was just that because I saw how many people were so passionate about working there, I knew that somebody else would be more passionate about working there than I was and on the role itself. And I just thought, maybe I'm also taking this opportunity away from somebody, even misaligning the universe in some way, and I don't have to hog this role if somebody else is going to enjoy it much more. So that was also a little factor. But yeah, you can see I definitely had a lot of thoughts about this when I decided to quit, and I do think I have a video that is unlisted on my channel because honestly I think it's kind of cringy to look at now, but that video is like me checking in specifically throughout the timeline at different moments when I decided and made decisions, and even live footage of me quitting, telling my manager that I'm quitting. So I will link that below exclusively for you, but at least for this one, from my memory, like I think it was October when I decided like I got to go, and I had questions beforehand too. But yeah, I was like, I have to go. And even then, I wasn't still definite in my decision, but I was definitely like 80% towards it, I think. And I decided I would leave at the end of the year, last week of December, because it was just gonna be like a nice end to the year, a little wrap, a finish, and the new year I could start with a brand new chapter in life and close this one. And to be very honest, I also have to recognize my privilege here because I do live at home with my parents, and so financial security like wasn't gonna be a problem. And I just realized that like, again, this was my selfish era. So if there was any time to do it, it would kind of be now. I didn't really have any doubts or fears. I am also quite a delusional person. So I was very much living in my delusional reality. I was like, we're just gonna leave, figure it out, everything will be fine. And so that's what I did. I didn't have anything lined up afterwards either. I wasn't looking for another job because I was just the path that I wasn't prioritizing, and I wanted to do something try myself. Give yourself a try. There's a song by 1975, Give Yourself a Try, that I listened to a lot back then, I think, and that was like kind of just inspiration to give myself a try. That's kind of the motto that I stuck with. One other thing, this was the time of the Great Resignation, so I think that actually had a lot of influence on me as well, because it was like, this is like a awakening, a corporate awakening, And yeah, I think that played into a factor as well. When I had made the decision, I looked on the company website resources, like the employee resources on the process. It's super easy. Basically just tell your manager and then you write a formal resignation letter to HR. That's not hard at all, but what I was stressing for was telling my manager, like how I was gonna tell my manager, because he'd honestly been so helpful in the process and just very nice and stuff. So I didn't want to, I don't know, like offend him. But I realized, you know, I can't like not quit just because he might get offended. You know what I mean? Because it's our own lives. Like that's the thing. Like we are the only one in control of our own lives, and we can't let other people, like what other people think, affect our decisions. I know that's very hard, but I was definitely stressed about like how I was gonna tell him. So I decided it was just gonna be in like one of our one-on-ones, our weekly one-on-ones, where we just give like status updates, check in, ask questions, all that. It felt like that would be the right way to do it. And I just said, the standard is like 2 weeks before your last day. So I was just like, I'll just tell him in the one-on-one 2 weeks before my last week. What had happened was, what I found out was, since it was the end of the year and it was the holiday season, like he was taking a vacation for basically a month, and he would be gone by the original date I had planned and also my last day. So it was just not gonna work out. And I was even thinking like, so who do I tell? Like, what am I supposed to do in this? And this is not something that you can Google. So it's just pure logical sense. I had to basically push the original date I had planned to tell him like 2 weeks before or something like that, definitely earlier. I think 2 weeks earlier than I had originally planned, and we were moving closer to that date because I think I found out in November and he was leaving early December. So it was like, okay, well, there's like only a couple like single digit meetings until that meeting, and that definitely stressed me out a little bit more, just put me on panic mode a little, but I still had enough time, so it was fine looking back on it. But I was definitely very nervous about it. Basically, I think the week before or a couple days before, but definitely the night before, I was rehearsing to myself how I would kind of tell him. Like I googled all these scripts and templates, and like how do you say I YouTube, like how do you tell your manager, all this kind of stuff. And the way they were saying it was so formal, and I was like, this company is so chill that like if you said that, it just sounds so off-putting. So I was like, okay, I gotta customize this to myself. I wrote my own little like couple sentences, a little spiel, and I rehearsed it. And the night before, I was recording myself on Zoom, saying it over again, just like practicing it, like literally rehearsing it and recording the process, looking back, listening to it, like, does that sound okay? Listening to the tone, like, did I say that right? I think because of like since 2020, and I've kind of always had a little bit of like speaking anxiety, I would say, like my voice will just randomly shake and I will run out of breath. I did not want that to happen when I was telling him. So I practiced a ton, and I would definitely recommend that if you're somebody who kind of experiences that same anxiety. So the morning of the day I was gonna quit, I felt this brand new chapter, this like, I felt something new in the air, just feeling already refreshed before I even said it. And I think I still had like 3 weeks of actual work until my end date, 3 or 4 weeks. And regardless, I was mentally like already feeling fresh. And I went out to like get breakfast, you know, it really felt like a new era of my life. And I practiced a little bit more in the morning, but I had already felt confident by then. And I was just kind of waiting for the meeting to start. And this was like, you know, a Zoom meeting, hopped on, waited for my manager to come on. And at this point, I was a little bit nervous, but I was like, you know, I don't know if you ever think about it the same way. I'm like, well, it's gonna happen, so it's gonna be over, so it'll be fine. So I was like, well, like 30 minutes from now, like this is gonna be over, so it'll be fine. When I broke the news, it was very smooth. Again, I have the unlisted video in my description where you can see the live footage of me saying it, but I think I delivered it very smoothly. There was no voice shaking, there was no any of that messiness. Yeah, he handled it very professionally. He was just like, I think he was definitely a little shocked because I'd only been there for half a year, which is really short in the corporate world, but long in my life. He was just like, okay, well, because we were gonna talk about other things in the other half of the meeting, because I mean, I said it in the beginning, by the way, like before he even got into, because he was like, let's talk about like next year planning, let's talk about like new projects or other stuff like that. And I was like, oh yeah, before getting into that, and I delivered. And I think that was a good decision because I had also questioned if I was going to say at the beginning or end, and I decided beginning because it would be awkward if like we talked about a bunch of stuff and at the end I was like, oh, by the way. So that's why I decided that. He was like, well, thanks for telling me. After the meeting, I just sent my letter over to HR, and my manager's like, all right, like we'll just get the process rolling with you offboarding and just wrapping up your work. So that's kind of what I did in my last weeks. There was also a little farewell Zoom, which was super cute. It was cute, but it was also kind of awkward. It's like when people sing happy birthday to you, because my very small team, and they're all super cool people, by the way, super nice people too, they went around and said something nice about me, and I was like, thank you. And like obviously it's very appreciated. In the last weeks, also like Slack people saying byes, wrapped up my work. I wrote this like whole essay, like this whole book. It could be published on kind of my processes and systems, because I remember when I started, I was so confused on like what my responsibilities were. So I really wanted to make sure that the next person coming in was getting a good start. So I didn't get any feedback on that little wrap up document, but I definitely think it's really good to leave behind for the person behind you, or the person after you, because they were saying like your replacement, and I was like, okay, like I need to prepare my replacement for what's coming up. It was also like the holiday season for the last weeks of December, right? So everything was super chill. Like I was just kind of in my space. I was also doing like the thing that I was like my responsibilities for that month as well, so it was a little bit tight in terms of like squeezing everything in, but that's just like to be expected. For my last day, I just sent a little last goodbye email to my manager with that wrap-up document included in there, and I logged off. And then over the next couple of days, I like sent my equipment back, my laptop, monitor, etc. But when I closed that laptop, I just felt like it was officially the new chapter. And I think that, along with it literally being like the last day of that year with the new year feeling, it just intensified that new year feeling that you feel. It's like the last day of school, last day of class, last day of your internship, last day of, you know, whatever. You feel that sense of closure. And it was very satisfying and rewarding, and just felt good. And I was also proud of myself too at that moment. And I'm so glad of like everything that I learned about the company, the people that I worked with, the recruiter who helped me initially, and also just like what I learned on the role as well. Because I think even though it's not like something that I use now in my life, I still think it was interesting just to see like the back end of how these like huge companies work. Yeah, and I think people always have the questions like, so what are you doing now? Now I'm focusing much more on the content world, so maybe I'll make a video about like monetizing from content creation, because it is definitely much more creative than what I used to do, and definitely something that's really a lot more fun to do. You know, there's good and bad of both sides of the coin, but I feel like this is definitely more aligned with like just the personal interest that I've always had. Like I've always made videos even as a kid, so it just aligns more. But I think there is a little bit of question marks when it comes to like what I'm doing, and so I can make another video about content creation in and of itself. But yeah, that's kind of the story of how I quit my job cold turkey. And if you're looking to do the same, or if you've also done the same, definitely comment your story down below, because I think this is honestly a very nerve-wracking time for a lot of people to be going through. It's a very weird and surreal experience, so I think your stories will definitely help people to just get a little bit more insight. I hope you got a thing or two from my story as well, and you can definitely leave down any questions you have in the comments. Also, subscribe if you vibe. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.